Amid the rolling seas where the horizon melts into the sky and silence is broken only by the rhythm of waves striking steel hulls, a unique figure walks the decks of the United States Navy. Neither armed with weapons nor commanding a division of sailors, this figure carries something less tangible but equally vital: faith, hope, and the quiet strength of presence. These are the Navy Chaplains, the spiritual anchors of a fleet that sails into danger, isolation, and the unknown. Their story is as old as the Navy itself, and yet it is one often overlooked, hidden within the broader sweep of maritime history. To speak of them is to step into the lives of those who carry sacred words and human compassion into the heart of war and the expanse of the ocean. The roots of Navy chaplaincy reach back to the earliest days of the American Republic. In 1775, when the Continental Navy was formed to challenge the world's most formidable maritime power, Congress authorized chaplains to serve aboard its ships. They were not just guardians of faith, but symbols of the moral fiber the new nation wished to weave into its fighting force. In the cramped wooden vessels of the 18th century, chaplains read prayers above the creaking of timbers, spoke blessings over sailors far from home, and buried the fallen at sea with words that sought to consecrate the deep waters as hallowed ground. Their ministry was forged in the elemental, where salt spray met scripture, and faith was tested by fire and storm alike. Through centuries of naval warfare and exploration, the chaplain's role expanded. The seas changed, the ships changed, the uniforms changed, but the core of their mission remained: to care for the soul of the sailor. They were there in the War of 1812, when cannon smoke blurred the horizon, offering words of courage to men who faced overwhelming odds. They were there during the Civil War, when brother fought brother and naval blockades strangled cities, offering the voice of reconciliation in a nation torn apart. They were there in the Spanish-American War, when America stepped onto the world stage, their prayers following sailors into the battles of Manila Bay and Santiago. The chaplain's ministry never made headlines, but it was always present, woven invisibly into the fabric of naval life. By the 20th century, as the Navy grew into a global force, the chaplain's calling deepened in complexity. World War I brought the chaplain into the trenches of the sea, ministering not only to sailors but to Marines storming foreign shores. In those days, chaplains often carried no denominational boundaries in their hearts. They preached to Catholics, Protestants, Jews alike, understanding that in the crucible of war, what mattered most was not the differences of faith, but the shared humanity of fear, sacrifice, and hope. The young sailor, staring at the endless ocean, did not ask what sect his chaplain belonged to. He only needed a voice that could steady him when his own strength faltered. World War II would test that calling more than any conflict before. With a navy stretched across the Atlantic and Pacific, chaplains became companions in some of the most harrowing battles in history. On the decks of carriers at Midway, in the tight steel bellies of submarines prowling beneath the waves, in the bloody sands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, chaplains walked with men who faced death daily. One story still resonates through naval memory: the tale of the 4 chaplains aboard the USAT Dorchester in 1943. When the transport ship was struck by a German torpedo in the icy North Atlantic, panic swept across the decks. Amid chaos and freezing waters, 4 chaplains, a Methodist, a Catholic priest, a Reformed minister, and a rabbi, handed out life jackets until none were left. Then, without hesitation, they removed their own and gave them to others. As the Dorchester slipped beneath the waves, survivors saw the chaplains linked arm in arm, praying together, their voices rising in unity as the sea swallowed them. Their sacrifice became immortal, not only in Navy lore, but in the enduring idea that faith at sea transcends all boundaries. In Korea and Vietnam, chaplains faced a new kind of challenge. Wars fought in distant, complex lands required them to move fluidly between shipboard ministry and service in the field with Marines. In sweltering jungles, in frozen ridges, and in makeshift field hospitals, chaplains became more than preachers. They were counselors to men haunted by fear, they were messengers of hope to the wounded, and they were witnesses to the unspoken burdens carried by those who returned home. They carried communion kits into foxholes, whispered prayers over the dying, and wrote letters of comfort to families thousands of miles away. Their ministry was quiet, often unseen, But it mattered deeply to those who received it. The Cold War extended their mission into new dimensions. As submarines slid silently through the depths on nuclear patrols, chaplains became the rare presence of humanity in a world of secrecy and confinement. On carriers where thousands of sailors lived in a floating city for months on end, chaplains worked tirelessly to sustain morale, to offer a listening ear, and to remind sailors that beyond the machinery of war, there remained the beating heart of the individual. They baptized sailors in makeshift chapels, celebrated weddings on decks beneath the stars, and comforted those who mourned in silence. For many, the chaplain was not just a figure of faith, but a surrogate family member, a reminder that even in the middle of nowhere someone cared. The role of the Navy Chaplain Corps has always been shaped by diversity. Serving a military that draws its strength from every corner of America, chaplains represent dozens of faith traditions. Protestant ministers, Catholic priests, Jewish rabbis, Muslim imams, Buddhist teachers, and chaplains of many other traditions serve side by side. Their task is not to impose their beliefs, but to ensure that every sailor has the freedom to live out their faith, even when thousands of miles from home. This pluralism is one of the Corps' greatest strengths, a reflection of the American ideal itself: unity without uniformity, respect without erasure. In the chapel spaces of ships and bases, prayers from many traditions rise together, echoing in the metal corridors like the heartbeat of a diverse nation carried across the seas. Modern warfare and modern life bring new challenges to the chaplain's calling. In the 21st century, deployments often stretch for months, sometimes close to a year, severing sailors from families, children, and familiar routines. Isolation breeds loneliness, stress, and sometimes despair. Chaplains stand in that breach, offering counsel, lending ears that hear without judgment and hands that comfort without condition. They guide sailors through marriages strained by distance, through grief that arrives in emails and phone calls, through the spiritual crises born of combat and separation. In a world that grows ever more technological, the chaplain represents something enduringly human. Beyond the battlefield, chaplains embody the Navy's humanitarian face. When earthquakes devastate islands, when typhoons rip through coastlines, when tsunamis drown entire towns, Navy ships often arrive first, carrying food, medicine, and rescue teams. Chaplains walk ashore with them, not with supplies, but with words of comfort, prayers of solidarity, and the simple gift of presence. They stand beside families who have lost everything, bridging the distance between cultures with compassion that speaks no language, yet understands all. In those moments, the chaplain reminds the world that the Navy is not only a force of might, but also a force of mercy. For the chaplains themselves, the calling is not without cost. They live the same hardships as the sailors they serve: months away from home, dangers of war, the weariness of endless seas. They often carry the hidden burdens of others, listening to fears, confessions, and grief without release. Yet they find strength in the very faith they carry, and in the knowledge that their presence can be the difference between despair and resilience, between loneliness and belonging, between a ship feeling like a machine and a ship feeling like a community. In every generation, stories emerge of chaplains who embodied extraordinary courage. During Vietnam, Chaplain Vincent Capodano became known as the Grunt Padre. Serving with Marines in the heat of battle, he moved fearlessly across the field, giving last rites, tending the wounded, and encouraging the living, until he himself fell under fire. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, not for killing enemies, but for giving his life in service to others. His legacy lives as a testament to the chaplain's unique heroism, a heroism measured not in victories seized, but in lives comforted. On modern carriers today, chaplains still walk the passageways, pausing at workstations to ask how sailors are doing, sitting in the mess decks to share a meal, standing on flight decks as jets roar into the night. They still officiate weddings and baptisms, still lead worship services, still write to families, still serve Marines on distant battlefields. They still bring quiet words to noisy spaces, gentle presence to hardened environments, and spiritual light to the endless horizons. In a Navy that sails into the unknown, chaplains remain the compass pointing toward hope. Their work may never be loud, their names rarely inscribed on monuments, but for every sailor who has leaned on their shoulder, for every Marine who has whispered a final prayer with them, their significance is immeasurable. They are the keepers of faith amid the waves, a human constant in a world of perpetual motion. As long as ships cross oceans and sailors gaze into restless waters, there will be those who need someone to remind them that beyond duty and beyond fear, there is a deeper strength, a guiding light, a voice that says they are never truly alone. And when the last watch is stood, and the sea holds its eternal silence, their legacy will remain like a beacon on the horizon, steady and unwavering, faith that sails with the fleet, faith amid the waves.